You can't love someone that you don't know. You can't love the idea of someone and expect that to be enough to sustain the relationship. That is true for your relationship with you. The relationship and love you are building with yourself. To love you, you have to get to know you. Properly this time, not through the distorted lens, cracked mirror, and negative locus of evaluation. Not what others think of you, not who you were taught you are or should be, but as you are, in reality, right now. "What do you want, Camille?" my therapist asked me. I said, I don't know. I truly didn't know. What should have been a simple question felt impossible for me to answer. I didn't know what I wanted, who I was, even what I liked, nor did I give myself permission to discover any of these things. Why would I? I hated myself and didn't think I deserved to self-discover, to explore, to find what brought me joy. My only purpose up until that point had been to fix my flaws and strive for perfection. That's all. Allowing myself to be the fully formed human being I was created to be, with wants, needs, desires, and goals of my own, felt impossible and scary. I couldn't trust that doing so would work out for someone like me. But who was someone like me? I didn't know myself well enough to answer that either, so I was faced with a choice. Avoid finding out, or take courage and find out. Instead of the blanket judgment of myself as a bad person, what if I took the time to actually find out who and what I was in my own time, based on who I was now and not who and what I had believed myself to be my whole life? Could I get to know me? Before you're able to do this, you're going to have to do something difficult. You should be used to that by now if you've made it this far. Congratulations, you have courage. You'll need to use it again. To try to not be ashamed of the things you did to soothe the pain in your past, the mistakes you made and the situations you willingly walked into, when you knew better and when you didn't know better. Let it go. It won't help anyone. It won't help you to keep beating yourself down, to hold those things over your head as reasons why you deserve your self-hate. You are starting over, from scratch with yourself. You cannot hold yourself to the same standard you do now when you didn't even like yourself. That's just not fair. Your focus now is learning to love yourself. The stability in that will come. When you know better, you do better, and when you feel better, and I firmly believe you will, and when you mess up because you're human and it's inevitable and you should prepare yourself for that, you practice self-compassion. You hold yourself accountable and take your time to figure out what led you to do whatever it is you defaulted to, and then you move on with more data for next time. Your mistakes after this point are amazing because it gives you valuable insights. You can know yourself better and choose better next time, however many times it takes. Give yourself the compassion and patience warranted to someone, you, who is learning. Like learning to walk, you're learning something even harder. Learning to be. So give yourself some grace. A lot of it. That may take some time. It might be worth pausing the podcast now and dealing with this before we begin. Self-forgiveness. This exercise and task is valuable. Write down everything you need to forgive yourself for. First, start with apologizing to yourself, and then forgiving yourself for not loving yourself in the past, and anything else you need to apologize to yourself and forgive yourself for. Have in mind, if you truly feel ready to make that commitment, or at least try, that your new intention going forward isn't to hurt yourself like that again, or put yourself in those situations like you did before, when you weren't equipped to, didn't know how to, and didn't think you deserved better. You deserve a clean slate. If episode 5 got through to you and you're tentatively entertaining the existence of a higher power, love is synonymous with forgiveness. Pray for the help and guidance to be able to do that for yourself. First, ask for forgiveness for things you did that hurt God and others, because that forgiveness is already waiting there for you. It is automatically available to be given to you when you sincerely ask for it. In Christianity, that price was paid through Jesus, and the Bible says those things we needed forgiveness for are now as far as the east is from the west. So far has he removed our transgressions from us. In other words, if you believe in him and what he said and did, consider the things you've done that you may still be ashamed of, forgiven and forgotten. Shame has no power here. Thank you, Jesus. You have to decide if you want to keep allowing that shame to exist in you. Knowing that forgiveness is available to you may make it easier to extend that same grace to yourself, because what's the use in holding on to things, holding things against yourself that you have already been forgiven for? Love encourages you to try again, to repent, to feel the regret and remorse, and let it motivate you to turn away from the things that make you feel ashamed and try and do better next time. So, this is you trying again. Don't be so hard on yourself. You've truly done enough of that in your own life, I can guarantee it if you've got this far. So take your time to process that before we move on. Once you've done this, reconciled with yourself, with God and accepted forgiveness, a second chance, you're then able, from a new and fresh beginning, to find out who you really are. You cannot love somebody you don't know, so it's time to get to know you. The real you. Not the you that is viewed through the warped lens of self-hatred, the lens that magnifies your undesired traits. No, you're developing a holistic view of you, multifaceted, flexible, as it happens, as you live your life in real time. You have to get to know and love the you are today, before you are ever able to entertain becoming the version of yourself you want to be. You have to come to accept you, as you currently are. And the only way to do that is to live and observe. You are now the archaeologist, the lead investigator of your own life, in charge of getting to know you, in an easy and pressure-free way, like you would when getting to know anyone, taking your time, observing and learning. You. For a lot of us, our self-worth hangs in the gap between who we are and who we want to be. We walk on the tightrope back and forth over that cavern. On the other end of the rope is our ideal self, and we experience anxiety and frustration and fear as we try to wobble closer to it, but keep getting pulled back by our reality, forever suspended over the cavern that acts as evidence of what we're not and what we lack. The reasons why we can't ever seem to get to the other side. Stop forcing yourself to be someone other than yourself. Stop forcing yourself to like things you don't like. If you can have that acceptance that, oh, I do like this thing, or I don't, and consider it just a new and interesting fact about you that you've learnt, not as a deficiency, not as a barrier standing in the way of you becoming who you think you should be. It frees you up to experience the joy of self-discovery without the judgment. This gives you the freedom to explore and enjoy life. What are you actually like? What is it that actually makes you feel alive instead of trying to force yourself to get that feeling from what you think is a more legitimate source? We don't give ourselves the time and grace to actually get to know ourselves as we are. We see every attribute we have as something that needs to be fixed or formed into something else. We don't see what we like and dislike as data about ourselves. Instead, we add it to the list of things that are wrong with us, even though they aren't. They just might not match up with the ideal version of yourself you're trying to force yourself to be. I'll give you an example. For years, I tried to like more classical and distinguished hobbies like piano, violin, or lane swimming. A lot of that was tied up in the kind of person I thought that would make me if I liked those things. A respectable and admirable person. But I hated it. I found it difficult to read sheet music. I hate the feeling of wet changing room floors and tangled swimsuits. I didn't practice because I didn't enjoy it, and it was a waste of money. The experience just ended up being miserable because I was trying to force myself to do something deep down I really didn't actually want to do because I didn't like it and was trying to force myself to like it. And in doing so, I concluded that there was something wrong with me and I was the problem and needed to work harder to change. Instead of just hearing myself out and accepting I just didn't like those things, instead I used my quote-unquote failure to like them as reasons to not like me. A couple of years back, I bought my first pair of roller skates. I remembered enjoying it as a child and I wanted to find a form of exercise that was fun, because one thing I've learned about myself is that if something isn't fun, it's harder for me to do. This is something I used to hate myself for, assumed it was because I was unproductive and lazy, but as I started my own self-love journey and began actually getting to know myself, and not force myself to be someone I'm not. I let those judgments go, in favour of neutral acceptance. So instead of ridiculing myself for being childish or picky, for not liking something a bit more serious, in inverted commas, I swallowed my pride and did it anyway. And it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. It brings me joy, which is not something I would get often. I would practice every day outside my house on the street, in my 20s, falling on my arse in front of the neighbours and school kids, but I knew that I enjoyed it now, and was allowing myself to. And that was far more valuable to me than other people's opinions. And I must say, the response of people in my neighbourhood was nothing but positive. Where I had expected judgment and negativity, my neighbourhood commended me on my progress. The school kids would help me keep an eye out for cars and cheer me on when they saw me skating. This doesn't always happen, but it proved to me that my fears were unfounded. Imagine if I'd let fear, pride, or embarrassment, or the belief that roller skating wasn't a serious enough hobby to invest in, lead me to not pursue it. I would have denied myself a healthy and life-giving form of joy and exercise that has enriched my life ever since. And that's why it's important to actually know yourself and what you like, because your body-mind, as we talked about in another episode, is trying to tell you something, to communicate to you what works and what doesn't work for you. It's trying to tell you how to live the best life for you, not what you want to work for you, whether you like it or not. Similarly, it turned out I liked salsa dancing more than I liked typical cardio. My body responded better to walking mindlessly on the treadmill than overworking myself on the elliptical. Self-discovery doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. Excavating and analysing the trauma and mental blocks is just the groundwork, but the rest of lifelong self-discovery, it's fun! Trying new things and finding out what you like, and instead of fighting it and trying to fit yourself into a box, but just running with it, the experience and result is amazing. When you respect yourself enough to choose what you like and not be discouraged from pursuing it, you automatically build self-respect, because it takes courage to do something you want to do that might incur judgment from yourself or others. When you do it anyway, you prove to yourself you have the courage, and to be crude, you prove to yourself you've got the balls. That builds self-respect and trust in yourself more than anything. The results are a full and enriching life, discovering the real you. Life should be like a smorgasbord. You try each new thing, tasting this and that. What you don't like, you put to the side. What you do like, you order more of, building your ideal and enjoyable meal. The issue with those of us who struggle with self-hatred and dislike is that we take one bite of something that we don't like, and we keep force-feeding it to ourselves, telling us over and over again that we should like this thing, that the right people like this thing, that if you don't like this thing, something is wrong with you. Not realizing how simple and easy it is to just catalogue data about yourself and move on. What you like and dislike are data that make up the full measure of you, and that gives you the raw materials you need to build a life that's going to feel good to you, tailored to what suits you, what makes you feel alive and whole and happy. It's devastating how many of us don't believe we deserve that. Well, we do. We will inevitably come across things we don't like about ourselves that we need to change, for our health, well-being, or relationships, or all of the above, and you'll be glad to hear that's okay. Because up next, we enter the last and best aspect of love. Love never leaves you the same. It doesn't leave you where it found you. The purpose of love is to encourage you to continually grow and get to a better place, a healthier version of yourself, a state of being where you attract and give more love back. When you have respect and compassion for yourself, it doesn't mean you just stagnate. It means that you actually care enough to act. It is the fuel of self-sufficiency, your belief that you can and will do what it takes to get the results you want for yourself without betraying yourself in the process. That if something is bothering you and you want to change it, you can. That you care enough about yourself to make that change. Self-hate tells you you need to change, but you can't, so what's the point? Yet always has you striving for perfection. Self-love tells you that if you want to change, you can. That you have what it takes. The raw materials are already in you. That if you can imagine, you can be it. That you already are the things you want to be. You just have to figure out how to act on it. Because love is an action, it inspires further action. Remember in episode 2, we spoke about how the critical voice has one objective, which is to make you feel bad about yourself. The critical voice doesn't care if you actually change, it just wants to affirm the belief that you're a terrible person. When you want to change, the critical voice says, "Good luck with that, you never do anything right anyway, you're only going to fail." But love says, "That's amazing, I think you can do it. We just have to figure out how. Let's try, and when we fail, we can just try again." You cannot hate yourself into change. You're allowed to want to change. You're allowed to want more. Self-hate tells you you don't deserve to. But I'll say it again. You're allowed to want to change. You are allowed to want more. If you're like me, you might be in a stage of life where staying the same feels terrifying, where you want things to change and change drastically. In life, relationships, location, career, what I want to tell you is this. That's okay. What you want and desire is valid, but also that you don't have to be afraid of accepting who you are now and where you are now. That doesn't mean you sentence yourself to stay this way forever. It means you know exactly what you're dealing with and what you have to change to get to where you want to be, instead of just panicking that you're not already there yet. We can't miss the steps in between. Unfortunately, everything comes with a, say it with me, process. But I want to say that if you are somebody who wants to make big changes, changes that don't betray your true self but actually come from your honest desires and integrity, have the faith who you want to become is already in you. All actions begin as ideas, thoughts first. Having an ideal version of yourself doesn't have to be an exercise in inadequacy. If you shift your perspective to see that because you already have the capacity to imagine it, who you want to be, it means that all you have to do is find the actions to get there, the habits. But what I'm saying is that you don't have to abandon yourself in the process, and that when things come up that you actually find you don't like or that don't suit you, even if they are in line with what you believe to be a necessary part of your ideal self, that you don't see it as a failure. Who you are shouldn't be a tightrope walk between who you are and your ideal self, but it's actually a safe cradle right in the center, a warm melting pot of both. For example, some people think they can only be brave and confident if they join some kind of outdoor expedition or travel the world. But what I'm saying is, don't discount those everyday occurrences where you can be that brave and confident person in a way that suits you. You can be brave and confident every time you strike up a conversation with a stranger or join a class that you've been nervous to join when you come out of your comfort zone. Do you see what I mean? The goal in this example is to be brave and confident, and that's not a bad thing. And instead of confining yourself to only being brave and confident in a certain context, you can discover that you are and can become brave and confident in many different ways and places. My ideal self is active and would ideally spend hours in the gym, but I don't currently have the energy levels for that. But I still reach my goals of being an active person every time I take my morning walk, every time I take the stairs instead of the lift, every time I put on my roller skates. I am her, my ideal self, because we share the same motivation, to be active. I'm just not limiting myself to the way I think it should look to be considered legitimate. Again, remember episode 2 about should, could, and would. Do you get it? Self-hate tells you you have none of the tools or good attributes it takes to be who you want to be. Self-love says that if you already have the idea and can imagine it, you can figure out a way to do it and be it in a way that is authentic to you and doesn't require you to become a different person, but to grow into the person you already are and are becoming. Don't you ever let anyone tell you that people don't change, because that isn't love. Love changes you. It is inherently a life-giving and growing force. It is an energizer, a motivator, and a source of movement. Love is power. Where there is no love, there is loss. Devastation, loss of life, hope, motivation, dreams, goals, kindness, compassion. Where there is love, there is encouragement, autonomy, change, compassion, patience, courage. Love is growth. Where there is love, there is growth. So don't worry. Loving yourself for who you are, when you hate who you are, doesn't mean you're going to stay the same. The more you practice that love, the more it changes you, but also shows you what's already wonderfully there, that you have been missing or discounting. So, your task for this week, you are going to start collecting data. Each time something happens, every time a singular opinion or feeling drops into your mind, write it down in a simple sentence, without arguing about its legitimacy or your right to feel the way you do. Things like, I like walking. I don't like yoga. I think this or that is boring. I like this song. I don't like this food. I love this sauce. I don't like these people. This makes me anxious. I hate this. I don't want to do this anymore. Or, I want to do more of this. And bear in mind it's completely and totally normal and inevitable for a lot of these opinions to fluctuate and change in different contexts, times of day, mood, time. The point is just not to judge them, to use what you discover as valuable information on how to tailor your life to suit you in the moment. This process is getting to know you. This is a process of radical acceptance, of cataloguing what is true about you without judging it or immediately trying to change it to conform to our ideal version of ourselves. It is simply collecting the data, accepting that what it tells you is honest and true in the moment about what you like and dislike, who you are, and moving on, not staying stuck trying to fight to conform and fit yourself into a box that isn't shaped for you. The same applies for triggers. Pay attention, listen and feel how your mind and body, your body-mind, react to certain stimuli or things that happen in your daily life. This makes me uncomfortable. This makes me upset. This makes me feel like a kid again, not in a good way. This show makes me feel weird. These people make me feel unsafe, or this person makes me feel safe. I don't like, in fact, I hate that certain things trigger me or upset me. Having a false persona of being bulletproof and unbothered built up pride in me, a desire to be ice cold and unaffected that is hard to let go of, to exchange defensiveness for the discomfort of vulnerability. And I have spent years beating myself up for letting things get to me or for being upset, instead of what I do now, which is instead of making myself feel bad on top of already being upset, I acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that certain things upset me and have affected me, and what I need in those moments is acknowledgement that I have been affected, compassion, kind words and patience, not criticism. Knowing what upsets me or triggers me now equips me to manage my exposure and reaction to certain things and be able to keep myself safe when I can, and comforted and resilient when I haven't been able to do that. Because life throws all kinds of things at you without your consent, and you have to know how to handle it without shutting down and taking yourself down in the process. When you collect this data, you give yourself a rich and generous selection, a toolkit that equips you to tailor your life in a way that enables you to live it to the fullest, to experience the full spectrum of enjoyment that is your right as a human being, just because. Why not? This is the foundation of boundaries. How can you know what boundaries to put in place when you don't even know what you do and don't like, what you do and don't feel comfortable doing or others doing to you? You have to pay attention to what your internal messaging is telling you, and you have to listen to it and do something about it. That will grow with time, but I promise you the more you notice it and pay attention to what your internal message is telling you, yes, no, good, bad, uncomfortable, it gets harder to ignore, and that makes it harder to not do something about it. Because you're paying attention now, because you're awake now, and that knowledge gives you the power to act in your best interest. And that's empowering. I'll give you an example. When I discovered that I don't like the elliptical or repetitive exercise, but I needed to exercise because my goal was to get fit, I had to figure out how to achieve that goal of changing my fitness level in a way that I knew I would actually stick to. I also knew that I hate being bored and I enjoy having fun because it distracts me from hard work. I knew if I wanted to make a lasting change that I stuck to, that I could be consistent in doing, I had to find a hobby that blended both of these facts about myself together. A hobby that was fun and dynamic and not boring, that each day wouldn't be the same. So now I do roller skating and salsa dancing and dynamic cardio, and because I enjoy them, I've now done it consistently for almost 2 years, and I reached my fitness goal. As well as that, those are the two things I now look forward to most in my week. When I discovered that admin work and sitting in an office all day makes me depressed and anxious, but sitting in a cafe and writing and reading and talking to people and helping people made me feel alive, I knew I needed to find a kind of work that catered to that. And I did. Do you see how it works? But none of that would be possible if I didn't honestly and truthfully, without judgment, collect the data and take it seriously. Take myself seriously. It's time to start respecting you and your experience of your own life. Only then can you have the autonomy and power to live and to change what you want to change. Some people might argue that's all fine and dandy, you don't always get to choose what you do. Sometimes you just stick it out, work that job you hate, etc. But that's where episode 5 comes in. Faith. Faith in a positive force that is on your side, working alongside you to actively help you achieve those goals of a better life. If you don't have faith, that will just seem ludicrous to you, and I can't help you with that. All I can say is that trusting that truth has worked in my life, and the lives of many others, my family members and friends, acquaintances, each of us that have stories that when we sat back, gave our desires and hopes and courage to God, trusted that He had our best interests at heart, saw how things seemed to just seamlessly and beautifully work out for good. It's up to you to have the courage to take those faith steps, to be brave when you feel it's being asked of you, to step out of your comfort zone and say, I trust you to help me work this all out. Show me. That is a journey I can't take you on. You have to seek after God and all He's capable of on your own, which is why you'll need courage. When I was discovering my creativity, I read the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which I can say wholeheartedly is a massive reason why I began writing the podcast in the first place. Throughout the course, she talks about this faith in God, in a creator who rewards the creative and the brave, those who trust, the peace that comes when you believe it is all working out for your good, and the validation when it does. I recommend everybody read that book. There are countless exercises in the book that are now part of my daily routine that have strengthened my faith and my creativity and my overall health, my confidence in who I am, not who I think I should be. She has some affirmations in there, and one of them has been my mantra throughout this whole process and will be for the rest of my life. It is, my dreams come from God, and God has the power to accomplish them. I repeat this to myself daily, as I take every day as a step of faith toward my goals and the life God has and wants for me, and that I want for myself, knowing that He's working beside me and for me in all of it, even and especially in the difficulty and the doubt and the fear I have of the unknown, the future. But still, I trust. Culturally, I've grown up around people who are working in careers that their parents ordained for them, careers that they aren't even sure they like because they haven't taken the time to really think about it and be honest with themselves. And I understand, because it's scary to think something like, I studied to be a doctor for 8 years because my parents wanted me to, and I don't like it. And if I don't like it, I want to quit, and that means I have to find a different job that I like, and that means I have to upset my parents, and then, all the while losing sight of the fact that choosing you in the long term always bears the best, healthiest, and most joyous results. And most importantly, it builds self-respect, and you cannot love yourself or anyone else without respect. So it's time to start respecting who you are, not who you think you should, could, or would be. Loving yourself only when you become a certain kind of person or achieve certain milestones isn't self-love, it's just conditional acceptance. Actual self-love comes from acknowledging and believing you have inherent value and worth before you even do any of those things, and when you do, they just validate what already exists. By showing yourself through actions, not acting as in pretending, but through actions, tangible behaviors, routines, etc., that communicate and reflect that value you already have, you have the right environment and mindset to grow out of, to change what you want to change. Instead of waiting for the magical day where you feel perfect enough to deserve it, loving yourself means accepting a new truth, the truth for you, that says, actually, I already deserve all the good things I've been withholding from myself, and it has nothing to do with what I do or who I impress or who approves of me. It's because I already have value as a human being, and it can't be added to or taken away. When you start thinking like that, you become a whole person, not a fragmented being trying to win points against yourself. You can actually start living because your foundation is solid. So, start getting to know you, collecting data on yourself which you can use later to inform your decisions, to choose what's best for you, what will show that you care about yourself, love in action, and give yourself the right environment to feel your best. Some of us feel sluggish because we're disassociative. Some of us just need to listen to our bodies and drink less caffeine and start responding to our needs. Stop doing the things that make us miserable or hanging around people who make us feel like shit. You won't know which one it is until you deal with both. You have to give yourself that fighting chance, that extra boost. You deserve that. What you're doing is making yourself your own responsibility, as you should be. In the next episode, I will go a little bit more into that, the things we need to be doing to take responsibility for ourselves and our health, because you belong to you. You are your own responsibility, so it's in your best interest to know yourself well, and that means taking care of you in the best way you know how. So let's let go, start fresh, and try again. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast. And listener, if no one's ever told you, or if no one ever meant it, you deserve love. Now go love yourself. As always, the episode resources and references, disclaimers and social media links will be in the show notes and description. The uncensored audio podcast episodes are available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Details on how to support the podcast are also listed in the show notes and description if you feel so inclined. If you would like access to the uncensored vodcast of the episode you just watched, as well as journal prompts and reading material, this is available through Patreon membership. Sign up to the mailing list to keep up to date with what happens next with the channel and the future of the podcast. All of this information and more about us can also be found on the Scattered Seeds website. Bye.